Survival once depended on the silent intelligence built into mud and stone. The ancient granaries of Mesopotamia were not just simple silos. They were the world's first hard drives, storing the vital data of a civilization's success. This exploration will give you a powerful new lens to understand our own modern struggles with sustainability and resource allocation. We will journey from the earliest grain pits to vast imperial warehouses, uncovering how a simple storage design could encode complex economic principles. How did a Bronze Age palace operate like a sophisticated logistics hub? What hidden strategies are written into the walls of a forgotten storehouse? By the end, you will never look at a humble granary the same way again. What do you think is the most important resource a society needs to store for its future? These ancient storehouses were far more than simple containers. To grasp their true power, we need to redefine what we mean by storage architecture. At its heart, it is the intentional design, the specific location, and the meticulous organization of any facility built to preserve a surplus. This goes far beyond stacking grain or stacking clay pots. It is about creating an entire system to control the flow of a resource, to manage who has access to it, and to dictate its distribution across seasons or even years. The placement of a single door in a granary, for instance, was a strategic decision. Was it placed for easy loading by farmers or for controlled disbursement by temple officials? The depth of a storage pit was not just about capacity, it was a calculated method to regulate temperature and protect the contents from spoilage. This perspective transforms these structures from passive repositories into active instruments of social and economic policy. They become the physical operating system for an entire civilization, the hardware upon which the software of law, trade, and power was run. Once you see this strategic layer, the silent walls of a forgotten storehouse begin to speak volumes about the society that built them. That simple hole in the ground was humanity's first declaration of independence from the whims of nature. Imagine the profound shift in thinking it required. For generations, life was about the immediate find, the day's hunt, the week's gathering. But with that first clay-lined pit dug into the earth, a community made a conscious choice to look months, even a full year, into the future. They were no longer just living in the present, they were actively building a buffer against it. This was not merely about storing excess food, it was about preserving the very potential for life itself, the sacred seed stock that guaranteed the next harvest. This act of delayed gratification fundamentally rewired society. A group with a reliable food surplus could support a larger population, could specialize tasks, could build more permanent homes. The location of these early granaries tells a powerful story. They were not hidden away on the edges of a village. They were placed centrally, often in the most protected areas, because everyone understood that the security of the grain was synonymous with the security of the community itself. This was the humble, earthy origin of risk management. By creating a physical answer to the question, what if the next harvest fails, these early farmers built the first shields against famine. The principles of foresight and collective security, encoded in those simple pits, would become the bedrock for every complex storage system that followed. The plastered sleeping platforms of a home in Çatalhöyük were more than just a place to rest. Directly beneath them, embedded in the very floor, sat large, carefully sealed bins filled with grain. This was not a hidden cellar or a separate shed. It was storage woven into the fabric of daily existence. You would have slept literally on top of your family's most vital asset, a constant physical reminder of the thin line between comfort and calamity. This architectural choice speaks to a powerful, intimate form of security. The heat from the living area above helped regulate the temperature in the bins below, while the sealed plaster construction kept pests at bay. But the meaning goes deeper than clever preservation. Here, wealth was not gold or jewels, it was the tangible, life-giving surplus of barley and wheat, and its control was managed at the most fundamental level, the household. Each family was the guardian of its own future, a self-reliant cell within the dense, bustling organism of the city. This system created a remarkable social balance. It granted individual households a strong degree of autonomy, reducing the potential for conflict over a single, centralized resource. Yet, the very density of the city, with every home practicing this same strategy, meant that the collective security of Çatalhöyük was built from the ground up, one family's prudent savings at a time. The architecture itself enforced a decentralized model of risk management, proving that complex resource strategies could begin not with a king's decree, but within the walls of a single home. This household-level control, however, could only scale so far. As societies grew more complex, a new question emerged, one that would require a completely different architectural answer. How do you manage the resources of an entire city, or even an empire? The transition from household bins to monumental granaries marks one of history's quietest revolutions. Suddenly, storage was no longer a private family matter, but a public declaration of power. In the world's first cities, the temple and the palace began to construct vast, centralized storage complexes that dwarfed anything seen before. These were not simply larger versions of the old pits. Their scale, their location, and their very design were all calculated to achieve a new kind of social order. By gathering the agricultural surplus of an entire region into a single, fortified location, a ruling class could now do something unprecedented. They could feed people who did not farm. This was the birth of full-time specialization. A potter could focus on crafting perfect vessels, a scribe could record inventories, and a soldier could train for defense, all because the central granary guaranteed their daily bread. This system of redistribution created a complex web of interdependence, the very backbone of urban civilization. The architecture of these facilities was intentionally imposing. Thick, towering walls of mud brick were not just for keeping grain safe, they were a constant physical symbol of the authority that managed it. You would walk through the city and see this massive structure, a fortress of food, and you knew exactly where the lifeblood of your society was controlled. But managing such a vast reservoir of resources demanded a new kind of intelligence, one that went beyond architecture and into the realm of information itself. How did you keep track of what came in, what went out, and what was owed? The answer lies in some of humanity's first written records, clay tablets that were not epic poetry, but meticulous ledgers of grain, oil, and wool. These administrative documents were the invisible software that made the physical hardware of the granary function. They encoded the rules of distribution, the records of labor, and the debts of the community. This was the true power of centralized storage. It necessitated the invention of bureaucracy, turning the chaotic flow of resources into a system that could be measured, tracked, and above all, controlled. These clay tokens were the ancestors of every spreadsheet and database we use today. Inside the vast storerooms of a Sumerian city, an administrator did not need to see the grain to know how much was there. He had a small, shaped piece of clay for every bushel. A cone might mean a small measure of grain, while a sphere represented a larger quantity. These tokens were more than simple counters, they were physical data. For a transaction or to record an inventory, the relevant tokens would be placed inside a hollow clay ball, a bulla, which was then sealed and impressed with the owner's mark. To verify the contents, you simply broke the ball. This was a secure, three-dimensional filing system, a contract locked in clay. The genius of this system was its evolution. Someone realized that impressing the shapes of the tokens onto the outside of the clay ball before sealing it rendered the interior contents obsolete. Why break the container when you could read the invoice from the outside? This simple innovation, pressing tokens into clay to create permanent, visible marks, was the very dawn of writing. The first written words were not prayers or kings' names. They were numbers and product codes for barley, livestock, and oil. This administrative revolution created a virtual layer of control that perfectly mirrored the physical granaries. The thick mud brick walls secured the actual grain, while these clay tablets secured the information about the grain. They allowed for planning on a scale previously unimaginable. A palace scribe could now look at a tablet and know not just what was in storage today, but what was owed in taxes next season, how much should be allocated to temple workers, and whether the current surplus could support a new construction project. This was the birth of true economic forecasting. The strategy of resource management was now split into two parallel worlds: the tangible reality of the warehouse and the abstract reality of the ledger, each reinforcing the other. This sophisticated fusion of physical and informational control reached its stunning peak in the intricate economy of a Bronze Age palace. The Palace of Knossos was a colossal machine for managing abundance. Walking through its sprawling complex, you would have passed row upon row of long, narrow rooms, their floors crowded with enormous ceramic jars taller than a person. These were the pithoi, the vital storage containers of the Minoan world, and their arrangement was anything but random. This was a system of specialized magazines, a logistical blueprint written in clay and stone. Each of these cool, dark rooms likely served as a dedicated repository for a single commodity, one for precious olive oil, another for rich wine, and still more for the foundational stores of grain. This deliberate separation was a masterstroke of organization, preventing contamination and allowing for precise inventory control. The strategic genius extended to their location, clustered around the busy central courtyard. This placement meant that goods did not need to travel far to reach the administrative heart of the palace or to be loaded onto carts for distribution. The flow of resources was channeled for maximum efficiency, turning the entire palace into a dynamic hub where supplies were constantly moving in and out. The staggering volume of these magazines speaks to an economy of breathtaking scale. The palace was not just storing for its own inhabitants, it was accumulating a surplus vast enough to feed a large class of artisans, officials, and priests, and to fuel a thriving trade network across the Mediterranean. This centralized storage acted as a massive economic shock absorber. In a good year, the pithoi would be filled to the brim, creating a buffer against future poor harvests. This surplus could then be used to pay laborers, fund grand projects, or be traded for exotic goods like copper and ivory, insulating the entire civilization from the unpredictable cycles of nature. The very architecture of Knossos was a physical declaration of control over time and uncertainty, a Bronze Age fortress against scarcity. Yet, while the Minoans built their resilience on centralized plenty, other civilizations were forced to develop equally brilliant strategies in landscapes of extreme scarcity. Where a Mesopotamian palace stockpiled grain, a Persian engineer captured a river underground. In the heart of the desert, the ultimate expression of storage architecture was not a towering granary, but a hidden, flowing channel called a Qanat. This was a civilization's answer to the most relentless threat of all, evaporation. The system was an act of profound geological intelligence. teams of workers, known as mukanis, would first identify a water-bearing aquifer at the base of a mountain range. Then, with breathtaking precision, they would begin digging a gently sloping tunnel back towards the plains, sometimes for dozens of miles. The slope was everything, just steep enough to let gravity pull the water along, but gradual enough to prevent erosion. Along the entire length of this subterranean river, they dug a series of vertical shafts down to the tunnel floor. These were not for drawing water, but for something even more vital: construction, ventilation, and most importantly, maintenance for generations to come. The Qanat was a living system, a communal project that demanded continuous care and shared responsibility. Its very existence turned the concept of storage inside out. Instead of building a container to hold a static resource, they engineered a dynamic system to continuously deliver a flowing one. The water emerged at the surface in the arid lowlands, creating a permanent oasis where cities like Persepolis could flourish. This was long-term risk management carved directly into the earth. The investment was enormous, often taking years or even decades to complete a single Qanat. But the payoff was a sustainable water source that could last for centuries, a testament to a society that planned not for the next harvest, but for the next 100 harvests. This mastery of a liquid asset required a different kind of foresight, one that considered geology, physics, and the unwavering commitment of a community. It proved that the most brilliant storage strategies sometimes involve not just holding a resource still, but guiding its journey. The wealth of Egypt was measured not in gold, but in the golden sheaves of grain piled high in the pharaoh's storehouses. These state-run granaries, colossal mud brick complexes that lined the Nile, were the true engines of the kingdom. They transformed the river's annual gift into a stable, storable form of power. This system operated on a grand, centralized scale. Each year, a portion of every farmer's harvest was collected as a tax in kind, flowing into these vast repositories. This was not mere hoarding, it was a brilliant economic stabilizer. In years when the Nile's flood was too low or too high, threatening famine, the state could open its granaries and release stored grain back into the market. This action prevented price gouging, calmed social unrest, and literally fed the population through hardship, reinforcing the pharaoh's divine role as the guarantor of order, or mat. This strategic reserve had a second, equally powerful function. It funded the impossible. The great pyramids and temples were not built by slaves, but by a rotating workforce of thousands of skilled laborers. And how were they paid? Their wages came in the form of daily rations of bread and beer, drawn directly from the state's granaries. This meant the pharaoh could mobilize a massive workforce without a monetary economy, converting agricultural surplus into monumental, eternal architecture. The biblical story of Joseph, who advised the Egyptian ruler to store grain during 7 years of plenty to survive 7 years of famine, is a powerful allegory for this very system. It captures the essence of state-level foresight, where managing a biological resource against the uncertainty of time became the highest form of governance. The architecture of these granaries was designed for this singular purpose. Their thick walls insulated the grain from the desert heat, and their raised floors protected it from dampness and pests, ensuring the kingdom's lifeblood remained viable for years. This was risk management perfected on a civilizational scale, all built upon the humble kernel of wheat. From the river's predictable bounty, our journey now takes us to the unpredictable highlands, where an empire forged a different kind of resilience. High in the thin air of the Andes, the Inca Empire solved the problem of distance with a network of stone storehouses that transformed the mountains themselves into a sprawling pantry. These Qullqas were not clustered in a single capital, but were deliberately scattered in their thousands along the steep slopes of the imperial road system. Their placement was a stroke of geopolitical genius. By building storage facilities at different elevations, from the chilly high plains to the warmer valley floors, the state could stockpile a diverse portfolio of goods, each preserved in its ideal climatic niche. Freeze-dried potatoes, known as chunyo, could be kept in the cooler high-altitude Qulqas, while maize, blankets, and military equipment were stored further down. This meant an Inca army on the march, or a team of administrators traveling across 1,000 miles of rugged terrain, could be supplied from state-owned reserves without ever having to take resources from local communities. It was a system designed for frictionless imperial control, turning the logistical nightmare of mountain travel into a manageable, even predictable operation. The architecture of each Qulqa was meticulously tailored to its contents. Circular stone foundations with clever ventilation channels allowed air to circulate, preventing the rot of precious grain stores, while other designs were optimized for keeping potatoes frozen or textiles dry. This was not a one-size-fits-all approach. It was a highly specialized, state-run supply chain carved into the landscape. The entire network functioned as a massive shock absorber for the empire, smoothing out regional shortages and ensuring the steady flow of tribute and redistribution that bound distant provinces to the central authority in Cusco. This system required more than just engineering skill. It demanded a profound, intimate understanding of the Andean environment and its microclimates. The Inca were not just building storage, they were weaving the very fabric of their empire into the mountains, creating resilience through a decentralized yet centrally managed web of abundance. This principle of distributing risk would find a powerful echo centuries later and continents away, in the bustling port cities of the ancient Mediterranean. A granary perched on stilts speaks a silent language of humidity and rain. In the damp river valleys of Southeast Asia, simply digging a pit was an invitation for rot. The solution was architectural elevation, lifting the entire storehouse off the ground on sturdy wooden or stone pillars. This clever design created a critical buffer zone, a breezy space beneath the floor that allowed air to circulate freely, wicking away the destructive moisture that would otherwise spoil the grain. It also formed a formidable barrier against rodents and insects, turning the structure itself into a fortress against decay. Meanwhile, in the frigid northern climates, the challenge was reversed: how to preserve the cold. Communities would dig deep pits, line them with stone or wood, and pack them tightly with ice and snow harvested from frozen lakes during the winter. These underground ice houses were then capped with a thick layer of straw or turf, a natural insulator that trapped the sub-zero temperatures inside. Throughout the summer, this subterranean refrigerator provided a steady supply of chilled water and a means to preserve meat and dairy, a seasonal gift preserved by clever design. This environmental intelligence dictated every choice of material. A civilization built with the earth beneath its feet, whether it was the sun-baked mud brick of Mesopotamia, perfect for arid heat, or the abundant timber of northern forests, ideal for raised platforms. There was no universal blueprint, only a series of brilliant, localized conversations between human need and the physical world. Each structure was a tailored answer to a specific environmental question, proving that ancient ingenuity was not about conquering nature, but about learning to listen to it. This deep, localized knowledge was the key to turning a simple shelter for food into a long-term survival strategy. Yet, the physical design of a storehouse was only half the story. Its true power was unlocked by the social rules that governed its contents. That sealed door on the central granary was more than a barrier to pests. It was the boundary of a social class. The individual who held the key to the community's surplus held a power far greater than any weapon, the power to decide who eats and who does not. This control transformed the simple act of storage into the very foundation of political authority. A priest could claim divine mandate for his management of the temple's grain, using its distribution to reinforce religious devotion. A chieftain could leverage his full storehouses to host lavish feasts, binding warriors to him with ties of loyalty and obligation. In this system, the stored surplus became a currency of influence, used to reward allies, employ specialized craftsmen, and fund the construction of monuments that further cemented the ruler's legacy. The architecture of these facilities broadcast this power relationship for all to see. While a common farmer's storage might be a simple pit or a clay bin, the elite storage areas were often fortresses within a fortress, set within the most protected precincts of a palace or temple complex. Their walls were thicker, their access points more limited and heavily guarded. In some Mesopotamian cities, the grain storage rooms were located immediately adjacent to the throne room or the main temple altar, a physical statement that the gods and the king were the ultimate sources of abundance. This was not merely about security from thieves, it was security from challenge. By making the collective survival dependent on a single, controlled point of distribution, the elite created a system where compliance was the only rational choice. This control, however, was not limited to baskets of barley or jars of oil. The same principle applied to every critical commodity that sustained and enriched a society. Control over the storage of precious metals funded armies and international trade. Control over the state warehouses of bronze ingots meant a monopoly on the production of weapons and tools. The very ability to plan for the long term, to withstand a drought or a siege, became the exclusive domain of the ruling class. The design of these storage spaces was therefore a physical map of the power relations within that society, a silent testament to the fact that the management of plenty was always, inextricably, about the management of people. Yet the ultimate expression of power was not merely storing grain, but locking away objects of pure desire. The royal tombs of housed chambers overflowing with treasures that served no practical need for survival. Lapis lazuli carved with intricate designs, gold vessels of impossible thinness, and strings of deep red carnelian beads. This was a different kind of storage architecture, one designed not to sustain the body, but to project status across generations. The presence of lapis lazuli, a stone that could only be sourced from distant Afghanistan, was a silent map of trade routes and diplomatic power, a physical testament to the kingdom's reach. These prestige goods were the hard currency of political alliances and divine favor, their value derived entirely from their beauty and rarity. Their secure storage within the most fortified and sacred spaces of a city, often deep within palace complexes or temple treasuries, was a declaration that the stability of the state rested on two pillars: the granary that fed the people and the treasury that secured its influence. This principle extended to the very engines of luxury production. Attached to these palaces were specialized workshops with their own dedicated storage systems. Here, the raw materials of power were meticulously organized: ingots of bronze and copper stacked like currency, precious timber planks seasoned in covered sheds, and semi-precious stones sorted in labeled containers. This was the supply chain for artistry. A master craftsperson did not need to petition a merchant. They simply requested materials from the palace's own secure reserves. This direct access allowed for the uninterrupted creation of the ritual objects, royal insignia, and elite goods that made the abstract concept of power visible and tangible to everyone. Managing this diverse portfolio of resources required a new level of administrative complexity. The same clay tablet that tracked 10 bushels of barley might also record 1 ingot of tin and 2 lengths of cedar wood, each with its own symbolic value and security requirement. This diversification marks a critical evolution in economic strategy, a society moving beyond pure subsistence to balance its biological needs with its political and cultural ambitions. The very architecture of storage had to adapt, with thick doors, barred windows, and trusted guards becoming as essential as ventilation and raised floors. What does this tell us? A civilization truly begins to mature when its plans for the future include not just what it needs to live, but also what it needs to be remembered by. A fortress was only as strong as its larder. The towering cyclopean walls of a Mycenaean citadel were not merely for defense, they were a shell protecting its most vital organ, the central granary. Within that intimidating stone embrace, the community's grain was safe from raiders, from rival kingdoms, and from the chaotic uncertainty of the outside world. This was storage architecture as a direct component of military strategy. The entire layout of the fortress was designed around securing that life-giving surplus. Access was deliberately restricted, funneled through heavily guarded gates and narrow passageways that could be easily defended. The granary itself was often the most robustly constructed building within the inner compound, its thick walls a final layer of protection. This principle was perfected by the Roman legions on the empire's distant frontiers. At a fort like Vindolanda in northern Britain, the granaries, or horia, were engineering marvels of security and preservation. They were built with massively thick stone walls and stood on tall, raised pillars of stone or brick. This elevated design served a dual purpose. It prevented ground moisture from spoiling the grain and created a space underneath that was too accessible for pests or any would-be saboteur. The entire structure was a statement in stone, a declaration that the Roman army was not just visiting, it was permanently supplied and could outlast any siege or local conflict. The ability to securely store a year's worth of grain for thousands of soldiers transformed a remote military outpost into an unshakable foothold of imperial power. It meant a legion could not be starved into submission. It could control the local population by its very presence, and it could project force deep into hostile territory, all because its architects had mastered the defense of its dinner. This constant, looming threat of loss elevated the simple act of protection into a high-stakes art. But the deepest human instincts surrounding stored wealth were not always expressed through walls and soldiers. Some of the most secure storage was intended not for a king's army, but for a god's favor. The granaries of Mohenjo-Daro were not just administrative buildings, they were temples to the principle of order itself. In the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley, the Great Granary stood as a monumental structure, its precise layout and airy ventilated platforms speaking of a deep, almost reverent understanding of preservation. This was not architecture born of pure utility alone. The care invested in its construction suggests that securing the community's food was a sacred charge, a duty that maintained the cosmic balance between the people and the powers that governed their world. This profound connection between the granary and the divine became even more explicit in later Vedic India. Here, the king's most vital role was that of a distributor, a channel through which the god's bounty flowed to the people. The grain stored in state warehouses was not seen as his personal property, but as a divine trust. Its careful management and fair redistribution were acts of piety, a fulfillment of a cosmic contract. This spiritual framing transformed the entire economic process. A tax collector was not merely an official, he was participating in a ritual that sustained the world. A scribe recording stores was not just a clerk, he was documenting the health of the kingdom's relationship with the gods. By wrapping the cold, hard logic of resource management in the sacred cloth of ritual and duty, these societies built something incredibly resilient, a system that was far harder to challenge or corrupt. To question the granaries' rules was not just to question a policy, it was to risk offending the divine order itself. This fusion of the practical and the spiritual ensured that the principles of foresight and collective security were woven directly into the cultural DNA, passed down through generations not as mere advice but as sacred law. And underpinning this entire sacred and social edifice was a quiet, persistent battle against an invisible enemy, the relentless processes of decay. These architectural principles for preservation found their ultimate expression in the management of a resource even more fleeting than grain, water itself. The Roman Horium, with its elevated floor, was a masterclass in combating dampness. By lifting the entire storage platform on a grid of stone pillars, engineers created a continuous air gap, a buffer zone that allowed breezes to pass underneath, wicking away any ground moisture before it could climb upward and spoil the dry grain inside. This was not a mere design preference, it was a direct application of hydrological understanding, a way to outsmart the natural tendency of water to migrate and destroy. The same sophisticated thinking was harnessed in the arid heart of the Middle East. There, the wind catcher or badger transformed a storage chamber into a natural refrigerator. This tall, chimney-like structure would capture the slightest breeze at its opening high above the ground, funneling the cooler, denser air down into the depths of an underground space or yakchul. As this air descended, it would push the warmer, lighter air out through a separate vent, creating a self-sustaining cycle of cooling that could dramatically lower temperatures without a single moving part. These were not accidental discoveries, but calculated architectural solutions born from generations of observing thermodynamics in action. They maximized the longevity of everything from grains and dates to medicinal herbs, turning a seasonal windfall into a dependable, year-round asset. This passive climate control was a profound form of waste reduction, a core tenet of managing any precious resource. The ultimate goal was to build a shield against time itself, ensuring that the bounty of a good year could endure to meet the needs of a lean one. The silent, cavernous space of the Basilica Cistern in Constantinople was a cathedral dedicated to survival. Beneath the bustling streets of the greatest city in the world, hundreds of marble columns rose from the still, dark water, supporting a vaulted ceiling that echoed with the drip of precious moisture. This was not a place of worship in the traditional sense, but a temple to foresight. Its vast capacity, enough to hold millions of gallons, was the city's ultimate insurance policy. A besieging army could camp outside the mighty Theodosian walls for months, yet within, life would continue, sustained by this hidden ocean. The engineering was a masterpiece of controlled flow. Water was channeled from distant springs via aqueducts, filtered through settling tanks, and then guided into this subterranean reservoir, where its cool, dark environment minimized evaporation and kept it fresh. This was hydraulic architecture on a metropolitan scale, a direct answer to the most pressing question of urban life: how do you hydrate 1 million people when your taps are cut off? The cisterns of Constantinople transformed the city into a fortress that could not be starved or thirsted into submission, its resilience literally built from the ground down. Far to the south, in the rose-red city of Petra, a different kind of water genius was at work. The Nabateans did not have the luxury of distant aqueducts. They had only the rare, violent downpours that scoured their desert wadis. Their entire city was designed as a massive water catchment system. They carved channels into the cliff faces, directing every drop of rainfall into a complex network of dams and cisterns, some small enough for a single household, others large enough to supply a neighborhood. They even paved open areas with impervious stone to maximize runoff. This was not merely storage, it was the active harvesting of a fleeting resource, a brilliant adaptation to an environment of scarcity. The precise calculation of volume and flow was essential. Too much water at once could trigger a destructive flash flood, while too little meant drought. Their system was a delicate balance, a testament to a society that learned to read the desert's harsh language and write its own survival into the stone. In both the imperial capital and the desert caravan city, the architecture of water storage was the invisible foundation upon which urban density and complexity were built. It allowed for the concentration of human life, for the bustling markets, the crowded neighborhoods, and the specialized workshops that define a city. This mastery of liquid assets reveals a profound truth. The greatest urban planning was not just about what you built above ground, but about the hidden, life-sustaining systems you engineered below it. A Roman warehouse was not an endpoint, but a gear in a vast, interlocking machine. The sprawling Heruke that lined the banks of the Tiber River in Rome formed a continuous logistical landscape. Ships from Egypt and North Africa, heavy with golden grain, would dock directly alongside these massive buildings, where cranes and laborers worked in a coordinated rhythm to offload their cargo into the cool, dry interiors. This was not a final destination, merely a temporary pause in a much longer journey. From these riverfront warehouses, the grain was redistributed, moving by cart or barge to smaller distribution centers, bakeries, and ultimately, the people of the city. The location was everything, a deliberate choice to minimize friction and cost at the single most critical point of entry. This principle of strategic placement was replicated across the known world. Along the sprawling Silk Road, the caravanserai served a similar purpose. These fortified way stations, often a day's journey apart, offered more than just rest for weary merchants and their camels. They provided secure, locked storerooms where valuable bundles of silk, spices, and glass could be safeguarded overnight. A merchant did not have to carry his entire fortune from one end of the continent to the other. He could travel in stages, using these trusted nodes to break his journey and manage risk. The entire network, from the ports of the Mediterranean to the mountain passes of the Himalayas, was studded with these architectural synapses, points where goods could pause, be accounted for, and then be passed along. This was a form of systems thinking made visible in brick and stone. The storage facility was no longer a solitary fortress, but a vital organ within a living, breathing economic body, its health dependent on the constant flow of trade and transportation. The true magic, however, that allowed this entire intricate system to function with any semblance of order came down to a surprisingly modern concept, one that we take for granted today. The entire mechanism relied on a quiet, unspoken agreement, a common language of measurement and form. A single, uniform Roman amphora was a unit of account in clay. The genius of this design was its repeatability. Whether it was crafted in a workshop in Hispania or one in North Africa, its size and shape were held to a consistent standard. This was not about aesthetics, it was about creating a universal building block for an empire's economy. A ship's captain in Austria could look at a hold filled with these identical jars and instantly calculate its total capacity. A warehouse manager in Rome could stack them in perfect, interlocking rows, maximizing space and stability. And a tax official could assess a merchant's duty based on a simple count of units, with no need for complex volume measurements. This standardization reduced the entire, messy process of long-distance trade into a clean, predictable arithmetic. The same principle of modular design governed the storage rooms of a Minoan palace. Their long, narrow magazines were not unique, custom spaces. They were repeated modules, each one a nearly identical copy of the last. This meant that if the palace's wealth in olive oil grew, administrators could simply allocate another identical magazine to store it, a plug-and-play approach to surplus management. The Inca Qullqas, too, often followed a standardized circular or rectangular plan, allowing for rapid construction and a consistent understanding of capacity across the empire. This move towards uniformity represents a cognitive leap, a shift from managing individual objects to managing systems and flows. It was a strategy that prioritized scalability above all else, allowing an administration to grow its reach without being overwhelmed by complexity. Yet, for all their brilliant efficiency, these systems of control were built upon a fragile foundation. A single season of drought, a volcanic eruption darkening the skies, or a shift in trade routes could render the most perfectly organized warehouse empty. The very scale they enabled also created immense vulnerability, concentrating risk in a way that a decentralized network of household storage never would. This inherent tension between elegant, centralized control and the chaotic, unpredictable forces of the natural world was the system's greatest and most enduring weakness. A crack in a single storage jar could unravel an empire's entire strategy. The very systems designed for resilience created their own unique vulnerabilities, turning points of concentration into catastrophic single points of failure. A prolonged drought lasting years beyond any historical precedent would slowly and inexorably drain the deepest cisterns and empty the most towering granaries. No amount of administrative genius could allocate what simply did not exist. Similarly, a silent, creeping infestation of weevils or rodents, introduced through a single compromised shipment, could spread like a plague through interconnected storage rooms, turning a kingdom's wealth into dust and husks. The physical architecture, for all its clever ventilation and raised floors, was only a barrier, not an absolute seal against the persistent ingenuity of nature. Perhaps the most corrosive failure, however, came from within. The meticulous clay tablets that tracked every bushel of grain were only as honest as the scribes who wrote them. Political corruption or simple mismanagement could lead to the hoarding of supplies by a powerful few, creating artificial scarcity and causing social unrest while storehouses still stood full. This was a famine amidst plenty, a crisis manufactured not by nature, but by a breakdown in the social contract that the storage system was meant to uphold. The archaeological record bears silent witness to these collapses. We find evidence of storage facilities violently burned, their contents charred and scattered, or simply abandoned in a sudden rush, the sealed doors left broken. These moments often coincide with wider periods of social disintegration, where the central authority that managed the surplus lost its legitimacy or its power to protect it. Analyzing these failures is profoundly instructive. It reveals that the success of these ancient systems was never just about engineering or volume. It was about maintaining a delicate, dynamic balance between the environment, the administration, and the trust of the people. A perfectly designed granary was useless if the farmers stopped delivering their grain, or if the soldiers meant to guard it turned against the state. This reminds us that no architecture, no matter how brilliant, is a permanent guarantee against all contingencies. The true legacy of these systems, therefore, is not their infallibility, but their enduring proof of a fundamental human struggle, the constant, calculated effort to build a buffer against an uncertain future. The echo of a Bronze Age ledger is found in the barcode on a warehouse shelf. Our sprawling global supply chains, with their container ships and automated distribution centers, did not emerge from a vacuum. They are the direct descendants of those first granaries and storehouses, running on principles codified in mud, brick, and stone. The massive regional warehouse that feeds a continent's supermarkets is the modern incarnation of the palace granary, a central node designed to gather surplus and redistribute it with ruthless efficiency. And the just-in-time delivery model, where parts arrive at a factory mere hours before they are needed, is a digital, hyper-precise evolution of the Inca Qulqa network. The Inca strategically pre-positioned supplies to eliminate wait times for their armies, and today, algorithms do the same for our manufacturing plants, minimizing the costly storage of idle components. Our deepest modern anxieties about resource security are simply new versions of this ancient puzzle. A nation's strategic petroleum reserve is a direct parallel to Egypt's granaries, a buffer against geopolitical disruptions instead of a failing Nile flood. The vast, humming server farms that store our collective digital existence are the new libraries of Alexandria, safeguarding a resource now more precious than grain: information. This is not a coincidence, it is a lineage. We are still playing the same game, just with different pieces and on a planetary scale. Recognizing this continuity is more than a historical curiosity, it offers us a powerful lens. We can look back at 5,000 years of human experimentation in storage and distribution, seeing what systems fostered resilience and what architectures led to collapse. This long view provides us with a deep well of wisdom, a chance to learn from the past as we design the resource networks of our shared future. The silent intelligence of a Qanat or a raised granary speaks directly to our modern crises. These were not systems designed for maximum quarterly profit, but for multi-generational survival, built with a profound understanding of local conditions. They used the earth itself for insulation, gravity for water flow, and prevailing winds for cooling, operating on free, passive energy rather than complex, fragile technology. This principle of working with the environment rather than forcing a solution upon it is a lesson we are urgently relearning. In an age of climate volatility and disrupted supply chains, the ancient concept of a buffer is suddenly relevant again. Just as a pharaoh's granaries held grain to withstand a poor Nile flood, our strategic petroleum reserves and national food stockpiles are modern versions of the same risk management strategy, a necessary cushion against global shocks. The communal aspect is just as critical. The maintenance of a Qanat was a shared responsibility, and the security of a city's grain was a collective endeavor. This underscores a timeless truth: resilience is rarely an individual achievement. It requires collective action and a shared commitment to managing common resources for the common good. The ultimate takeaway is a shift in perspective, from seeing resource strategy as a short-term extraction to viewing it as a long-term covenant with the future. We are being challenged to design systems that do not just serve us today, but that honor the needs of those who will come after us. To start this process, we need only look around with new eyes. The local farmers' market, with its seasonal produce, is a small-scale model of distributed, low-energy food storage. A community seed library is a direct echo of those first farmers preserving their most vital asset for the next planting. Even the rainwater barrel in a backyard garden is a micro-cistern, a personal step toward water security. These are not just lifestyle choices, they are modern applications of an ancient, enduring logic, the logic of stewardship. By recognizing the wisdom embedded in these old stones and old ways, we can begin to build a future that is not just efficient, but truly resilient. A single grain of pollen, trapped for millennia in the porous clay of a broken jar, can tell a silent story of trade and taste. This is the quiet work of the archaeological detective, piecing together the grand strategies of the past from the smallest fragments they left behind. We know these ancient systems not from history books written by the winners, but from the physical evidence of their daily operations. Scientists can analyze the chemical residues inside a storage vessel and determine it once held olive oil, wine, or even a specific type of grain. The layout of a vast granary, long since crumbled to dust, is reconstructed from the ghostly imprint of its post holes and the faint lines of its foundation stones, revealing a precise blueprint for efficiency. The most direct testimony comes from those sun-baked clay tablets, which are nothing less than 4,000-year-old inventory lists and balance sheets. They record shipments received, rations distributed, and debts owed, offering a window into the meticulous bureaucratic mind that managed a civilization's stomach. Even the soil itself holds clues. A technique called soil chemistry analysis can detect the elevated phosphorus levels left by the decay of vast quantities of organic matter, mapping the outline of a storage pit that vanished thousands of years ago. This painstaking detective work does more than just confirm that people stored food. It allows us to reconstruct the sophisticated economic logic of people who left no written explanations of their intentions. We are reading their strategic minds through the silent language of their architecture and their trash. This growing body of evidence forces a profound reconsideration of our ancestors. They were not primitive figures simply struggling for survival. They were brilliant systems thinkers, architects of resilience who encoded their most vital knowledge not in scrolls, but in the very arrangement of their stones and the organization of their clay pots. The very word primitive collapses when you stand before the intricate logic of a Minoan magazine or the buried geometry of a Qanat. These were not the trial and error experiments of simple people, but the calculated systems of sophisticated economic thinkers. To label them primitive is to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of their intelligence, an intelligence measured not in silicon chips, but in long-term social stability. These early planners were masters of context, designing systems perfectly tailored to their specific environment, whether that meant storing grain in the floors of their homes in Çatalhöyük or carving ice houses into the permafrost of the north. Their success reveals that economic sophistication is not a single, linear path, but a branching tree of diverse and brilliant adaptations. They intuitively grasped concepts we now formally study, like risk pooling, where a community's collective surplus protects any single member from individual disaster. They perfected centralized redistribution, a system so effective at supporting specialization that it built the pyramids, and they engineered logistical networks that allowed empires to span continents, all without a single digital map. This forces a profound shift in how we view history's arc. The story of human progress is not a simple, upward march from simplicity to complexity. It is a story of different cultures finding different, equally valid, solutions to the universal human challenges of scarcity and uncertainty. Some chose the path of extreme centralization, like the pharaohs of Egypt, while others, like the citizens of Çatalhöyük, built resilience from the ground up through household autonomy. One was not necessarily better than the other, merely different answers to the same eternal question. Recognizing this diversity of economic thought is more than an academic exercise. It is a vital source of inspiration for our own time. We are currently grappling with the limitations of our own highly centralized, globalized systems. Looking back at these ancient models offers us a catalog of alternative strategies, a reminder that there are many ways to organize a society for survival and even flourishing. Their enduring legacy is an invitation to think more creatively about our own future, to design systems that are not just efficient, but also resilient, equitable, and deeply attuned to the world we actually inhabit. The ultimate test of our resource management strategies will not happen on Earth, but in the airless void of space. Designing a habitat for the Moon or Mars is the modern equivalent of building a Qanat in the desert or a granary for a city under siege, a life or death exercise in creating a perfectly closed loop. Every drop of water, every breath of air, and every calorie of food must be meticulously accounted for and preserved, with near zero tolerance for waste. The ancient principle of a strategic buffer stock becomes absolutely critical here. Just as the pharaohs stored grain for 7 lean years, a Martian colony will need deep reserves of everything, from spare parts to nutrient paste, to survive the 2-year gap between resupply windows from Earth. They cannot simply order more when they run out. This forces a return to the most fundamental logic of storage, where every gram of surplus is a direct investment in future survival. The passive preservation techniques perfected by our ancestors will find a new home in these extreme environments. The Roman Horium's raised floor, designed to combat dampness, has a direct parallel in the multi-layered, vacuum-insulated walls of a space habitat, which guard against the profound cold and radiation of space. The Windcatcher's elegant passive cooling could inform the design of thermal regulation systems that manage temperature without consuming precious electricity. Perhaps most importantly, the ancient virtue of modularity will be essential. Just as the Minoans built their storage in repeated, identical magazines, a space colony will likely be constructed from standardized, interlocking pods, each a self-contained unit for living, farming, or storage. This allows for the system to be easily expanded or repaired, a plug-and-play approach to building a new world. In this grand endeavor, the future space colonist, monitoring hydroponic trays and recycling systems, is fundamentally engaged in the same practice as a Neolithic farmer carefully selecting seed grain for the next season. Both are making a profound statement of faith in the future, using the tools of their time to build a bridge across the uncertainty of time itself. Our journey from clay-lined pits to interplanetary arcs reveals a continuous thread, the unending human quest to secure tomorrow against the risks of today. That physical diary of human ingenuity is all around us, hidden in plain sight. The supermarket aisle is our modern granary row, its shelves a testament to a global system of just-in-time delivery that echoes the Inca Qulqa network. The humming data center is our new library of Alexandria, preserving not scrolls but the digital essence of our lives. These are not separate from the ancient world, they are its direct descendants, running on the same core logic of preservation and distribution. The silent lesson from those first clay-lined pits is that our deepest survival instincts are built into our environment, brick by brick and jar by jar. They remind us that civilization does not advance through technology alone, but through the enduring principles of foresight, planning, and communal effort. The next time you walk past a warehouse or even open your own well-stocked pantry, see it not just as a container, but as the latest chapter in an age-old story of securing tomorrow. Let these ancient strategies inspire your own view of our shared challenges, from local food security to global supply chains. If this journey into the mind of ancient engineers has shifted your perspective, we would love to hear what resonated most with you in the comments. Subscribe to join us for more deep dives into the hidden intelligence